A grocery clerk saved a baby in the parking lot and had no idea the child's father was watching from his limousine. She didn't do it for attention. She didn't know who the child was. She didn't even hesitate. But what happens when a woman with nothing to prove saves the daughter of a man who built his entire life around control, wealth, and calculated decisions? Why would she reject his reward money, power, even gratitude? And what if that moment, in the middle of a rainy parking lot, wasn't the end, but the beginning of a story that would reshape not just one life, but an entire community? What do you do when someone challenges everything you thought you knew without ever raising their voice? This is a story about courage without applause, love without labels, and the quiet power of simply showing up, even when no one is watching. Stay with us as we uncover a story that may just change how you look at kindness and who you believe deserves to lead. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories for more unforgettable journeys that remind us what truly matters. Now, let's begin. The sky over Willow Ridge was a soft gray that morning. Not quite gloomy, but not hopeful either. Just that kind of color that matched the sound of tires whispering over wet pavement. The rain wasn't heavy, just a steady drizzle that misted over the grocery carts at Bay and Bloom Grocers, and settled like dew on the hood of a dusty red sedan that hadn't moved all week. Harper Lane tugged the line of metal carts toward the corral, her boots sliding slightly on the slick asphalt. Her hands were raw from the cold steel, her uniform damp in patches where the coat couldn't keep out the moisture. She wasn't thinking about anything in particular, mostly just how much her feet hurt, how long until break, and whether there'd be any soup left in the staff fridge. Then, a flicker. Something moved small, fast, barely the size of a laundry basket. She froze. Beyond the cart return, maybe 10 yards out, a toddler. No coat, just a pink dress soaked through, knees splashing in puddles, arms swinging wide for balance, wobbling straight into the main drive lane, straight toward the rear of a black SUV that had just slipped into reverse. Harper's stomach dropped. She didn't think, she didn't scream, she just moved. Boots thudded across wet concrete, her heart hammering like a loose bolt. Time slowed in the strangest way, not blurry, but sharp, too sharp. The baby's curls bounced with each step. The SUV's reverse lights glowed red. The engine hummed, unaware. "Hey!" Harper shouted, her voice cracking with urgency. "Stop!" No reaction from the car. She reached the girl with seconds, maybe less, to spare. Swooping her arms under those tiny shoulders, she yanked the child backward with all the force her aching legs could summon. Her own elbow slammed against the cart rail, and a metal clatter echoed through the lot. The SUV screeched to a halt. Tires locked. Rubber burned. But it was too late to undo the moment. The little girl screamed, not from pain, just the suddenness of it all. And Harper. Harper collapsed to her knees, holding the child tight against her chest, the rain mingling with the sweat on her brow. People had started to look now, but not enough, not yet. The driver flung his door open. He was middle-aged, red-faced, already shouting. "What the hell are you doing?" "My car." Harper didn't move, didn't flinch. She looked down at the girl, shaking but unharmed, and pulled her close. "You almost killed a baby," she said. Not loud, but enough. He jabbed a finger toward the scratch on his bumper. "You think this pays for itself? You dented my she's 2 years old." Harper snapped. "You can fix your bumper. Her bones, not so much." And just then, a door opened across the lot. A long, sleek black car. The kind Harper had only ever seen in campaign ads or corporate charity galas. From the back stepped a man in a dark wool coat, still as stone, eyes locked on the scene before him. His steps were slow, deliberate, almost disbelieving. And when he got close enough, Harper saw something unexpected. Terror. Real. Human terror. "Lily," he whispered. The toddler looked up and smiled. Dada Harper looked at the man. Sharp cheekbones, expensive watch, black shoes that definitely hadn't touched a parking lot puddle before today. Without a word, she handed him the child, still breathing heavy, still kneeling in the rain. He held the girl to his chest like he might never let go. But Harper had already stood, wiped her hands on her damp pants, and walked away. No applause. No thanks. No name given. Just a young woman in soaked boots, disappearing through automatic glass doors while behind her, a man with everything stared at the spot she'd just left, realizing he'd almost lost what mattered most. The air smelled of rubber and rain. Harper stood frozen for a heartbeat, her hands still tingling from the sheer force she'd used to scoop the child away. Her elbow throbbed, bruised from the cart rail. Her breathing hadn't caught up with her yet. The man from the SUV was still yelling, his voice bouncing off wet metal and concrete. "You dented my car. You can't just run up like that." I could sue Harper, turned slowly. The child Lily was safe now, nestled in the arms of the tall man in the dark coat. But Harper's eyes locked onto the angry driver instead. She wasn't angry. She wasn't scared. She was hollow, tired. "You didn't see her," she said quietly. "What, you didn't see her because you didn't look." He jabbed a thumb toward the long scratch on his truck. "And what? Now that makes it okay." "What am I supposed to do with this?" Harper took a breath, the kind that steadies a storm brewing under the surface. "You almost backed over a 2-year-old, she said, her voice firm. "If a paint job matters more than her life, maybe you shouldn't be driving at all." For a second, there was silence, just the hiss of rain on pavement and the sound of a child's soft sobs muffled against her father's chest. The driver scoffed, then got back in his vehicle, muttering under his breath as he slammed the door. The truck rumbled away, leaving behind a trail of exhaust and tension. Harper didn't look back, didn't wait for an apology, didn't expect one. But the man in the coat, Miles Carrington, he was still standing there, still holding his daughter like the world had gone sideways. His coat soaked at the shoulders, his shoes splattered in mud. He looked nothing like the polished image she'd seen in news headlines or investor reports. Just a father, shaken, speechless. "Is she hurt?" he asked finally, voice brittle. Harper shook her head. "No, but she could have been." He looked down at Lily, whose head rested against his chest now, thumb in mouth, the last tremors of fear fading. "I didn't see her slip out," Miles whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "I turned for 1 second. Just one." Harper didn't let him finish. "That's all it takes." He looked up at her. For the first time, their eyes met, and Harper saw it then. Not arrogance, not entitlement, just guilt. Plain, raw guilt sitting heavy on a man who wasn't used to feeling powerless. He opened his mouth maybe to say thank you, maybe to explain, but Harper stepped back. "You don't need to thank me," she said. "Just be better next time." Then she turned, water dripping from the hem of her pants, her braid clinging to her back, and disappeared through the grocery store's automatic doors. Miles stood there for a long time. The rain began to fall harder now. But he didn't flinch. He barely noticed, because the woman who had saved his daughter had just vanished, and he didn't even know her name. The next morning, the sky over Willow Ridge had cleared, but inside the back seat of a black sedan, the storm still lingered. Miles Carrington stared out the window, his daughter asleep in her car seat beside him. Her curls stuck to her cheek, her fingers curled around the ear of a stuffed giraffe. She looked peaceful, like nothing had happened. But something had. Something had cracked open inside him, and it wouldn't close. He should have been in his office, or at the investors' brunch downtown. Instead, he had asked his driver to take him to Bay and Bloom Grocers. Again. He'd already searched the store's website that morning. No staff page, no social media footprint, just a landline number and an outdated flyer for a canned food drive. That woman Harper had walked away without giving her name, but Miles wasn't used to being left in the dark. So he made calls, talked to someone who knew someone who knew someone. By 900 a mem, he had it. Harper Lane, 26, grocery associate. No known relatives in state. No college degree. One registered emergency contact, her younger brother, Elliot Lane, listed under a city-funded disability program. Miles reread the name on his phone, Harper Lane. It didn't tell him much, but the way she'd stood in that parking lot, soaking wet, heart-pounding, completely focused on saving his daughter, that told him everything. "Sir," his driver called softly. "We've arrived." Miles stepped out, dressed in a charcoal wool suit, no tie. The sleeves of his white shirt folded at the wrists. For once, the look wasn't curated. It was just what he'd thrown on after changing out of last night's soaked coat. He walked through the automatic doors of the store, the same ones she had disappeared behind. It was surprisingly quiet for a Monday. Shelves were half-stocked. The scent of citrus cleaner clung to the floor tiles. He scanned the aisles. Then he saw her. A red polo shirt, sleeves pushed to her elbows, kneeling in aisle 5, restocking a bottom shelf with boxes of tea. Her braid swung over one shoulder, and she moved with quiet precision, like someone used to being overlooked but never distracted. Miles approached slowly. He cleared his throat, and she looked up, her face blank for half a second, then sharp with recognition. "You," she said flatly. He gave a slight nod. "Harper Lane. You already know my name, which means you went looking for it." "I did." Harper stood, brushing her hands on her pants. Why Miles reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a white envelope. Thick, unmistakably padded. "I wanted to thank you properly for saving my daughter." Harper glanced at the envelope, then back at him. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It just settled low and steady. "What's in there?" "Money, a token of appreciation. I don't want it. You haven't even opened it. I don't need to." She pushed the envelope back toward him with one hand. "I didn't save your daughter for a reward. Mr. Carrington. It's not about it is." She cut in. "You think this makes it right? Like you're fixing something with money. But this isn't about you." A silence fell between them. One of those silences that weighed more than words. "I didn't mean to offend you," Miles said, almost quietly. "You didn't offend me," Harper replied. "You just reminded me how rare it is to do the right thing without needing a receipt." She turned back toward the shelf, lifted another box of chamomile, set it in place like their conversation hadn't just carved open the air around them. Miles stood there, still holding the envelope, completely. Still, behind him, a customer's shopping cart rattled past. Somewhere, a radio played soft country music over the PA system. But in his mind, all he heard was her voice. "This isn't about you." And for the first time in a very long time, Miles Carrington, venture capitalist, keynote speaker, boardroom closer didn't know what to say. Miles sat in his office the next morning, but he wasn't working. The view from his 17th floor window offered a perfect shot of downtown Willowridge glass buildings catching sunlight, traffic weaving like ribbons below. But none of it felt real today. The envelope was still in his coat pocket, unopened, useless. He'd made 1,000 transactions in his life, deals that closed over steak dinners and discreet handshakes, thank you gestures that doubled as strategic investments. He had built an empire from moments just like that, but this time it hadn't landed, and he couldn't stop hearing her voice. You just reminded me how rare it is to do the right thing without needing a receipt. He leaned back in his chair, rubbed his temples, and sighed. What kind of person turned down that kind of cash? Not out of pride, but principle. He tapped open his laptop and scrolled through her file again. Harper Lane, 26, no degree, no online presence, outside a 2-year-old fundraiser for her brother's medication. Worked at Bay & Bloom full-time. Lived in a small second-floor rental off Cedar Street. No criminal record, no debt. It was almost frustrating. There was nothing to fix, no leverage, no need. Just a woman who had stared down a moving vehicle to save his daughter and then refused his money without hesitation. He closed the laptop and stood, walking toward the glass. His reflection met him tailored suit, silver cufflinks, polished shoes, but his eyes looked off, like they belonged to someone watching his life, not living it. He couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to him the way she did, without flattery, without fear. Harper Lane hadn't just pulled his daughter out of danger. She had rattled something loose inside him, something he hadn't named yet. He glanced back at his coat, hanging neatly on the hook by the door. The envelope inside felt heavier than it had yesterday. Not because of the bills, but because of what it couldn't buy. Back at the store, Harper leaned against the break room counter, sipping weak coffee from a paper cup. Maggie, one of the senior clerks, leaned in. Who was the suit that came in earlier? Looked like he got lost on his way to a country club. Harper didn't answer right away. She just watched the steam rise from her cup. No one, she said eventually. Just someone who doesn't hear the word. No very often. Maggie chuckled. Well, bless him. He looked like you handed him his first real-world lesson. Harper cracked the faintest smile. But it didn't last. She wasn't proud of the moment, and she wasn't angry either. But something about the look in his eyes, that confusion, that broken composure, it stayed with her longer than she expected. She knew men like him, people who made decisions from behind glass walls, people who only noticed struggle when it walked into their polished world and bled on the carpet. But this man, Miles Carrington, he looked like he had finally seen something he couldn't unsee. She didn't know if that mattered. Not yet. But something in her gut told her. It might. Miles hadn't slept well. He kept telling himself it was stress. Another quarterly review, a delayed merger, the school district zoning lawsuit. But deep down, he knew better. It was Harper Lane. A woman he'd spoken to for maybe 5 minutes total, and yet somehow, she was still in his head, louder than most of the boardroom voices he'd known for years. That kind of presence wasn't normal, not in his world, not in his carefully measured life. He sat in his kitchen, now glass walls all around, floor polished like a museum. Lily was at daycare. His phone blinked with texts he didn't open. Instead, he opened his laptop one more time, pulled up her name again, Harper Grace Lane, born just outside Detroit, moved to Willowridge at 19, accepted into Monroe State University on partial scholarship for education, dropped out in her second year, No formal reason listed, but the trail was there if you looked close enough. Her mother had been diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's around that time. Medical bills, hospital visits, and one younger sibling, Elliot Lane, now listed on a disability aid roster for schizophrenia-related services. Miles stared at the screen for a long time. So that's where the sharp edges came from. The spine that didn't shake? This was someone who had grown up building her life in cracks, not hallways. Someone who held too much without ever asking for help. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled. She didn't need money. She needed, what respect, no. Not even that. Just space to be left alone with her dignity intact. He suddenly felt small, not because he lacked power, but because he'd assumed it was all she'd ever want from him. At the grocery store, Harper was restocking the dairy case when her coworker Maggie appeared again. "You okay?" Maggie asked gently. "You've been quieter than usual." Harper shrugged. "Just tired." "You sure it's not about him?" Maggie added. The suit guy, Carrington Harper, didn't answer. She just pushed a row of milk cartons back into alignment. He came in here like a man used to being heard, and left like someone finally told him no. Maggie chuckled. "I almost felt bad for him." Harper bit the inside of her cheek. She didn't want to talk about it, not because she was embarrassed, but because she wasn't. What she felt was something else, conflicted, because for all her sharpness, for all the lines she had drawn in her head to keep him separate, when she'd looked into his eyes in that aisle, she hadn't seen arrogance. She'd seen something, unsteady, lonely, even, and now she couldn't shake it. She told herself it didn't matter. He was rich, busy, untouchable. People like that didn't linger. They didn't show up again. They always moved on to easier narratives. So why was he still here? Why did she keep replaying the way he looked at his daughter like she was everything? And then at Harper, like she had broken something open in him. She didn't want to feel sorry for him. Didn't want to wonder what it would be like if a man like that ever looked at her with something other than awe or confusion. But thoughts aren't invitations, and empathy isn't weakness. She stood there for a long moment, fingers still cold from the dairy shelf, mind somewhere else entirely. That night, Miles sat in his living room, Lily asleep upstairs, and reread a quote on a card someone had once given him. "We are not remembered for what we buy, but for who we become when no one is watching." And Harper, she had become unforgettable, not for saving his daughter, but for not asking anything in return. It was a Tuesday afternoon in Willowridge, and the park was alive in that way. Only small-town parks could be faint laughter, distant dog barks, the hum of old swings whining under excited feet. Harper Lane had just finished her shift. Instead of going home, she wandered to Crescent Park, where the trees still held their late summer leaves. A gentle breeze tugged at her hair as she leaned against the old jungle gym, watching a cluster of kids chase bubbles through the air. One of the kids giggled, a little girl with bouncing curls and a laugh so free it tugged at Harper's chest, before she even turned fully. Lily, the toddler, was chasing a butterfly near the sandbox, wobbling slightly as she ran, and not far behind her, a tall man in a gray pullover, jeans, and very unpolished shoes. Miles Carrington. Harper stiffened, instinct pulling her shoulders back, but Lily saw her before Miles did. "Harper," the girl squealed. Harper managed a small wave. Lily dashed toward her, arms flung wide, nearly tripping on her own feet. Harper caught her with a soft laugh. "Hey there, little storm cloud. You remember me." Lily nodded. You said I was a jelly bean. Harper smiled. That does sound like something I'd say. When she looked up, Miles had reached them. He stopped a few feet away, chest rising a little harder than the gentle walk warranted. I didn't expect to see you here, Harper said first. I didn't expect her to run straight into your arms. He replied. She shrugged. Kids have good instincts. There was a pause. Not awkward. Just unsure. You mind if I sit for a second? He asked, motioning to the nearby bench. Harper considered it, then nodded. He sat. Lily busied herself gathering tiny sticks at their feet. The silence between them was real, alive, not empty. Miles cleared his throat. Listen, about the other day. You already tried to thank me, Harper said. Didn't work. No money this time. No speeches. She raised an eyebrow. Then what? He looked at her, and for once, it wasn't guarded. I just wanted to try again, without my ego in the way. Harper leaned back against the bench. The breeze lifted strands of her hair. She studied him quietly. People like you don't usually get second chances, she said. People like me usually don't notice when they need one. He replied. That earned him a glance. He continued, I've spent most of my adult life thinking everything had a value. Every person, every gesture, even kindness. And then, you just did something good. Without any ask. I didn't know what to do with that. Harper didn't smile, but she softened. Just a little. I'm not an idea, she said. Not your redemption arc, not your wake-up call. I know. They both watched Lily now, who was lining up sticks like soldiers on the grass. I don't need your story to change, Harper added. I just need you not to rewrite mine. Miles nodded slowly. That, he understood. They sat like that for a while. The sound of children laughing in the distance, the scrape of a leaf across concrete, and the quiet flicker of something uncertain, but no longer unwelcome. Before leaving, Harper stood and turned to him. She's a good kid. Miles looked up. She is. She deserves someone who doesn't just love her, but sees her. Then, without waiting for a response, Harper walked away. Lily looked up, confused. Where's Harper going? Miles knelt beside his daughter, smoothing her curls. She'll be back, he said softly. He didn't know if it was true, but somehow he hoped she would. Hospitals don't smell like healing. They smell like plastic gloves, microwaved coffee, and too many waiting rooms that have seen too many people fall apart. Miles Carrington had just left a brief hospital visit with a longtime donor recovering from surgery. It was supposed to be a quick drop-in, a handshake, a photo. He was already halfway to the elevator when something made him stop. A flicker of color. A figure slouched in a molded plastic chair near the neurology wing. Head tilted forward, arms crossed, eyes closed but not fully asleep. It was Harper Lane. She looked smaller than he remembered. Not fragile, never that. But weighed down. She wore the same red polo shirt from the grocery store. Her name tag was crooked. A brown paper bag sat beside her, torn slightly at the corner. Miles hesitated. He could have walked past. She wouldn't have seen him. She looked like she didn't want to be seen. But he didn't walk past. Instead, he turned and walked slowly toward the vending machine, fed in a few crumpled bills, pressed the blinking button for a coffee that would almost certainly taste like regret. He approached carefully. Terrible choice, he said quietly, holding out the cup. But warm. Harper blinked up at him, disoriented. Then, recognition. Surprise. Her eyes searched his face for a second before she reached for the cup. "Still better than the machine downstairs," she murmured. He sat in the empty chair beside her. Neither spoke for a while. Just two people sitting under flickering fluorescent lights, sipping bitter coffee from paper cups. After a long moment, Harper spoke. "My mom's in there," she said, nodding toward the double doors. "She has Parkinson's, diagnosed when I was 20. Miles listened. She used to teach high school English, quoted poetry while making toast. Now she forgets my name some days. I'm sorry," he said quietly. She nodded. "Everyone says that, but thank you for not saying it like it fixes anything." He looked at her. There was something in the way she sat, shoulders drawn in, hands wrapped tightly around the cup, like she was trying to hold something together with muscles that had already given out. She cleared her throat. "I didn't mean to snap at you the other day," she said. "At the store, with the envelope." "You didn't snap," he replied. "You spoke your truth. I just didn't know what to do with it." Harper gave a dry smile. "Most people don't. They assume kindness comes with an invoice." "I used to believe that," Miles admitted. And now he paused. "Now I think some people show up even when no one's watching, even when no one claps." She didn't answer right away, just looked down at the cup in her hands. Then, slowly, she smiled, not wide, not performative, just a soft, tired smile, and that was enough. When the nurse finally called names through the speaker overhead, Harper stood. Miles rose with her. "Do you need a ride?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I've memorized the bus schedule by now." He nodded. There was nothing else to say. "Take care of your mom," he said. She turned back briefly. "You too," she said, then added softly, "with Lily. I mean—" He watched her walk away, the hallway lights glinting off the creases in her shirt, her ponytail swaying. For once, she didn't walk away from him out of anger, just grace. And that somehow unsettled him more. Monday mornings at Bay and Bloom. Grocers were a mess, crates stacked in the back, 2 cashiers out sick. The loading dock flooded overnight. Harper Lane had barely clocked in when the first delivery truck rolled up. She grabbed a box cutter, braced her sore shoulder, and got to work pulling pallets, restacking shelves, flattening cartons that wouldn't quite fold. She was mid-haul, wrestling a box of dry goods halfway to the stockroom when a voice called out behind her. "Need a hand?" She turned and nearly dropped the box. There he was, Miles Carrington, no tie, no expensive coat, just dark slacks and a button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled up, standing at the end of the aisle, holding nothing but open hands. "What?" Harper said slowly. "Are you doing here?" He smiled, awkwardly. "I remembered you said your deliveries come Mondays." She blinked. "You came. To help with boxes, I figured the least I could do was offer 2 hands that are good for something other than shaking." Harper stared at him for a beat too long. Before she could protest, he moved beside her and took the box she was holding. It wasn't light, and he grunted softly as he adjusted his grip. She raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" "Suit." He chuckled. "It's not quantum physics, but yeah, this is heavier than a campaign speech." For the next hour, he stayed. No cameras, no entourage, no announcements. Just him fetching crates, breaking down cardboard, accidentally tearing a pallet wrap and sheepishly asking how to redo it. Harper found herself watching more than helping. Not because she was suspicious, but because it was oddly humanizing. This was not the man who drove luxury sedans and read market forecasts. This was a man who squatted to pick up spilled cans and asked where the tape gun was kept. Customers noticed. Some whispered, I think that's him. What's he doing back there? Harper rolled her eyes when she overheard, but said nothing. At one point, Miles paused near the checkout, wiping a smudge off the scuffed freezer door with a rag from his back pocket. Harper walked over. You really don't know how to quit, do you? He looked up, sheepish. I'm not trying to impress you. Then what are you doing? He hesitated. I guess. I just wanted to be useful. For once, without a speech, without a transaction. Harper studied him. Behind them, the store buzzed with early shoppers and squeaky cartwheels. But in this tiny moment, the world seemed still. I'm not asking for penance, she said. I know. I'm not your cause. I know that too. She picked up a small crate, handed it to him, then stopped trying so hard. He nodded, but as he turned away, she called after him, Doesn't mean I didn't notice. He looked back. There was something different in her voice, something that didn't quite say welcome, but definitely no longer said, go away. Later that afternoon, as Harper sat on the break room bench sipping instant coffee, she reached into the bag Miles had left behind. Inside was a slightly smushed muffin blueberry, with a sticky note, For your break, the one you never seem to take. She stared at it, then smiled. A real one this time. Just for a second. The rain had returned by Friday. Not the soft drizzle from that day in the parking lot. This was heavier, colder, the kind of rain that soaked your socks before you reached the door. Harper Lane was mopping the front tile of Bay and Bloom Grocers, watching footprints appear faster than she could clean them, when she heard the door chime. She didn't look up at first, but the footsteps paused in front of her, and then came the voice. Don't worry, Miles Carrington said. I wiped my shoes. Harper glanced up, mop still in hand. He wore a gray rain jacket this time. No designer suit, no umbrella, just a man with damp hair and something, uncertain in his expression. You here to restock cereal again? She asked. He offered a small smile. Not today. She leaned on the mop handle. So I came to ask something. That usually means I'm about to say no. He didn't laugh, didn't deflect, just held her gaze. I want to build something, he said. Something that outlives apologies and news cycles. Something that actually helps. Harper raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Miles pulled out a folded folder from under his coat, opened it slowly. Inside were rough plans, handwritten notes, a name printed at the top, the Haven Project. It's a place for kids, he said, teens mostly, the ones who age out of after-school care but still need a space, where they can learn practical skills, eat a warm meal, talk to someone who isn't judging them. Harper stared at the papers, slowly reached for them. There are enough places pretending to help, she said. What makes this different? I don't want it to be polished, he said. I want it to be real, and I want you to help build it. Harper froze. Excuse me. You, he said. Not as a mascot, not as the girl who saved my daughter, but because you see people. You know what matters, and I don't want to design this without someone like you. She closed the folder, slowly. You want me to co-create a community initiative? She said flatly. Yes. No PR. No cameras. No ribbon cuttings. No headline. No slogan. She narrowed her eyes. You're asking me to trust you. I'm asking you to trust what it could mean. She looked down at the folder again, her mind already forming objections. It could collapse. It could be a stunt. She could end up being used again. People always made promises in the rain, but when the sun came out, so did their real intentions. She exhaled through her nose. "I've been let down by a lot of people in your shoes," she said softly. "So have I," Miles replied. That stopped her. He didn't try to sell it further, didn't push, just stood there in silence, letting her decide. Harper finally tucked the folder under her arm. "I'm not saying yes yet. I wouldn't respect you if you did," he said. "I'll read it. I'll think. That's all I'm asking." She gave him a small nod. And for the first time, maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the man in front of her she was beginning to believe in. It was the work. 3 weeks later, the back wing of the old Willow Ridge Library smelled like paint, elbow grease, and too many donated chairs. The floors had been stripped, the windows scrubbed. The walls were now a soft sage green, the kind Harper said made kids feel like they mattered before they even sat down. And in the middle of it all stood Harper Lane, paint-splattered hoodie tied around her waist, clipboard in one hand, tape measure in the other. She didn't like being the center of anything, but somehow she was. "Can we put the reading nook here instead?" one teen asked, pointing near a set of low shelves. Harper knelt beside her. "Sure, if you help me move the bean bags and measure the light coming in during the afternoon." "You mean I can help design it?" Harper smiled. "That's the whole point." Across the room, Miles Carrington leaned against a bookshelf, arms folded, watching quietly. He didn't interrupt, didn't take over, not anymore. Instead, he watched the way Harper knelt to listen instead of standing to direct, how she made space for voices that had long since stopped expecting to be heard. It wasn't a program. It was becoming something real, but real things came with cracks. And that afternoon, the first one appeared. A man in a tailored Navy suit entered the room, flanked by a younger assistant. "Mr. Carrington," he said, offering a polished handshake. "We're thrilled to see the progress on the community wing. The foundation board is ready to match funding provided. Of course, the branding aligns with the Carrington Foundation's mission." Miles stiffened. Harper looked up from a crate of donated books, confused. The man continued, flipping through a branded pamphlet mock-up. "Imagine it, the Carrington Center for Youth Empowerment." That name alone. "No," Harper said sharply. The room fell quiet. No cameras, no plaques. That was the agreement. The man blinked. "I'm sorry, but who exactly are you?" Harper stood slowly, not angry, not defensive, just resolute. "I'm the reason this room doesn't look like a conference lobby. And the reason those kids trust this space enough to show up." Miles stepped forward, clearing his throat. "She's my partner," he said, "and we're not changing the name." The assistant began to protest, but Miles cut him off with a look he hadn't used in months. "Tell the board," he said firmly. "This isn't for show." Harper watched him carefully, and for the first time, she saw him stand with her, not in front of her. Later, after the man had left and the room had quieted again, Harper sat on the floor beside a half-assembled shelf, sorting alphabet cards with a 10-year-old boy named Micah. Miles crouched beside her. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't answer right away, just kept stacking cards. "I was ready to walk away," she admitted, "when I heard that man speak like it was already his. I know. I don't do well with broken promises. I'm trying not to be one," he said softly. She finally looked at him. "You're not." Then she gestured around the room, books on mismatched shelves, rugs fraying at the edges, uneven chairs. "It's not perfect," she said. But maybe broken things still work, if they're held together by the right people. He smiled, then looked down at the flashcard in her hand. It read H for Harper, he asked. She rolled her eyes, but she didn't stop smiling. The late September sun bathed Willow Ridge in gold. Bright streamers hung between lampposts. Paper lanterns swayed gently above food tables lined with donated cupcakes, fruit skewers, and uneven but heartfelt signs painted by the kids of the Haven Project. No logos, no TV crews, just chalk drawings, mismatched chairs, and the smell of grilled corn drifting through the afternoon air. It had been 1 year. 1 year since a soaked parking lot. 1 year since a 2-second decision changed 3 lives. And now. Harper Lane stood at the edge of the park, arms crossed, heart pounding, not because of nerves, but because of everything this day meant. She wore a pale blue dress with mud already on the hem. Lily Carrington, now 3, clung to her hand in a matching ribbon, face painted with a glittery sun. Across the field, a small wooden platform stood ready. It wasn't a stage, just a couple of stacked pallets, covered in burlap. Harper wasn't the one stepping up there. Not today. Oh, Miles Carrington was. He walked slowly toward the makeshift microphone. In rolled-up sleeves and dark jeans, no speech cards, no tie. Just a man who had learned to listen more than he spoke. The crowd, made up of neighbors, volunteers, and families from across the city, gradually quieted. Miles took a breath, then another, then began. Exactly 1 year ago, someone pulled my daughter out of the path of a moving SUV. Not because they knew who she was, not because they wanted thanks, but because it was the right thing to do. He scanned the faces, landing briefly on Harper. She didn't flinch, but her fingers tightened slightly around Lily's hand. That same person refused my money, refused publicity, refused even a proper thank you. Some in the crowd murmured, because to her, kindness isn't currency, it's instinct. And she reminded me someone who has built his life on value, negotiation, leverage, that the most powerful things we do are the ones we do without applause. Harper's jaw tensed, but her eyes softened. She saved my daughter, but she also saved me, because that moment shattered something I didn't realize needed breaking. My assumptions, my pride, my belief that people only do good if there's something in it for them. He paused. The wind rustled the edge of his shirt. Children laughed in the distance, unaware of the gravity of the moment. Because of her, this place exists. The Haven Project, not as a legacy, not as a campaign, but as a living, breathing space built by hands that know what it's like to be overlooked and choose to see anyway. He looked at Harper again, longer this time. So today isn't about a ribbon. It's about remembering that a woman in a grocery uniform changed more than a life. She changed a man, a town, a future. There was no applause at first, just silence. The good kind. The kind that happens when something honest has been spoken into the room. And then, slowly, a quiet ripple of clapping, one volunteer, then a mother, then a teen in a hand-painted Haven Project shirt. Harper didn't move, but Lily reached up and hugged her leg tightly. Across the crowd, Miles stepped down from the platform. People made space for him as he walked. He stopped in front of Harper. "You didn't want to thank you," he said, quieter now, "but I'll say it anyway. Thank you for not walking past, for not waiting for someone more qualified, for teaching me what real looks like." Harper's eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "I didn't save her for you. she said softly. I know. I did it because it was right. Miles smiled gently. That's why it mattered. Lily beamed between them. Can we have cake now? They both laughed, and in that moment, a laugh, a nod, a shared pause. Something else was quietly built. Not a program, not a promise, a beginning. The sun had dipped low, brushing the rooftops of Willow Ridge in orange. The lanterns from the celebration swayed in the evening breeze, their glow dimming as kids packed up painted signs and folding chairs. Inside the now empty wing of the Haven Project, soft footsteps echoed against linoleum floors. Crayon marks still dotted the corner tables. Half-eaten cupcakes sat abandoned in paper wrappers. Harper Lane stood by the window, watching a group of volunteers load the last few boxes into a borrowed van. Her dress was wrinkled, her braid half undone, but her eyes carried something calm, contentment. Behind her, someone cleared his throat. She didn't have to turn to know it was Miles. He walked over quietly, holding out a bottle of water. She accepted it with a nod. They didn't speak for a while, just listened. To the faint laughter outside, to the creak of the old building settling into night, to the kind of silence that didn't need filling. Then finally, you still think broken things can work? Miles asked softly. Harper smiled at the window. They're the only things that ever have. He leaned back against the wall beside her. His hands were dusty, his shirt smudged with paint he hadn't noticed. He didn't look like a CEO. He didn't need to anymore. After a long pause, he spoke again. I used to think I was doing okay, had everything planned, clean lines, controlled outcomes, applause on cue. Harper turned to look at him. He met her eyes. But it wasn't living. It was maintenance, disguised as success. She didn't interrupt. When Lily laughs now, he continued, something opens up. And I don't mean that as a father. I mean that as a man who almost missed the best thing he had until someone he didn't know reminded him what it means to care. Harper leaned her shoulder against the window frame. Lily's the best part of both of us, she said. He nodded, then added quietly, but she only laughed like that again after you came around. Harper looked down, unsure what to do with words like that. Then she felt something soft, Lily's head, resting against her leg, already half asleep, her curls tangled, a smear of frosting still on her cheek. One hand tucked into Harper's. She hadn't even heard her come in. Miles moved closer, not touching, just near. Sometimes, he whispered, the people who save us stay. Harper exhaled slowly, not from exhaustion, from peace. She looked at the girl who had once been inches from danger, now curled up in the safety of something none of them could name, but all of them could feel. She glanced at Miles. I'm not going anywhere, she said softly. His smile was quiet, grateful, real. They didn't kiss. They didn't make promises. They just sat, 3 people, on a cold tile floor, under flickering ceiling lights, in a building still a little broken, but filled with something stronger than certainty. Hope, because what began with one act of instinct had become something you couldn't put in a folder, couldn't write into a policy. It was belonging. It was showing up, even when no one claps. It was the choice to stay and build together. What if the person who saves your life also ends up saving your soul? Harper Lane didn't wear a suit. She didn't own a business. She didn't ask for recognition. But with one brave act, she shattered the illusion that worth is measured in wealth and reminded a man, a community, and maybe all of us, that goodness doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs to show up. This wasn't a love story in the traditional sense. It was a story of respect, of trust, built slowly between people from different worlds who discovered they shared the same heart. In a world too often divided by status, power, and appearances, Harper proved something radical. Empathy can build what money never could. So the next time you pass someone in a uniform or overlook a quiet act of courage, ask yourself, are we honoring the loudest voices or the truest ones? If this story moved you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. We believe stories like these deserve to be told, shared, and felt again and again. And until next time, be kind, be brave, and never underestimate the ones who go unnoticed.